What's up everybody, Coach Mo here coming out with you with a brand new Overwatch video, and in this video we're going to be breaking down the hardest characters to master in all of Overwatch. Are they worth learning? You let me know. No, in all seriousness, so we're going to be breaking down the hardest characters to master in all of Overwatch across different roles, and then we're going to be breaking down the question, are they worth learning? Is it worth putting the time and effort into mastering this character, or are you going to put on all that work for absolutely no reason at all, and it's not going to be a character capable of climbing you all the way to Grandmaster and beyond very easily? We're going to break down all that, so you make sure not to waste all your time in a character that doesn't have transferable skills and is not going to be very good in the long haul. We're going to break all that down, so make sure you watch to the end, and then go to the GameLeap website in the links down below for high quality in-depth Overwatch guides, tips and tricks, VOD reviews. We got in-depth guides over every single hero in the entire game, so do yourself a favor, go check it out down below right now. But without further ado, let's jump into the Overwatch video. Now essentially we're going to be talking about characters that are generally difficult to master, and we're going to be talking about whether, based historically, if that character has always been good, and also do you learn skills on that character that will easily transfer to other characters, or are you just relying on that one character being viable for it to just be your main going forward? We're going to talk about all that, so let's jump into the first character, which is Tracer. Now, ultimately, Tracer has seen a lot of play and has been a very good character to play in most of Overwatch, throughout most of Overwatch history. Now, there was a period of time where Brig was absolutely nuts, and in the GOATS meta where Tracer was really bad, but outside of that, Tracer has been overall very, very strong. Now, that being said, underneath the highest ranks of play, Tracer has always been viable, with even in Grandmaster, if you're good enough at Tracer, you can make her work. Now, I do think that Tracer is definitely worth learning, even though she can be pretty difficult to master. You not only have to master tracking, but blink management. You got to be very careful with your game sense because you could get killed out of nowhere by a number of different things. However, when you're learning the movement, the fast-paced tracking, the mechanical skill, Tracer's skill set will transfer to a lot of different characters. You've seen this even in pro play where notable Tracer mains, people like Soon, could transfer to other characters like McCree and Widowmaker just with a little bit of practice. And it really comes down to the mechanical skill required to play Tracer. If you become a master at Tracer, you are very good at many different things, and just with a little bit of practice you could become proficient at a number of different characters. So I do think that learning Tracer is not only worth your time, it's going to set yourself up for the future of Overwatch and Overwatch 2 as the different metas happen, and even if Tracer's not viable, it'll be really easy for you to pick up another character. Now the next character that we got to talk about is Sigma, who actually has an extremely high skill ceiling. To master Sigma can be very difficult. Now right now Sigma's not in the best place. In the past he's been one of the better tanks in the entire game, but Sigma has kind of been taking a back seat. However, he's definitely still viable in the lower ranks under Grandmasters and Masters. Now, that being said, is it worth your time to learn Sigma? Well, that's a little bit of a difficult question. The overall problem with mastering Sigma is that he's very different from a lot of the other tanks, so there's not that much overlap, even if mechanically he is probably the most difficult of all the tanks to perfectly master. On top of that, because of the balance changes with Blizzard, making him weaker, making him different, changing his entire playstyle around, it's really hard to know whether or not they're just going to dramatically change the character in the future. You're going to spend all this time and effort mastering it, only to have to play a completely different character altogether. Now, that being said, the actual rules of the game and the game sense that you build playing Sigma is extremely high. You learn cooldown management, micro-minning your different abilities, positioning. All these things are very important on Sigma. Proper spacing as a tank can really help you transition to the off-tanking role. So I do think that playing Sigma is something that can definitely develop you as a player, but I wouldn't necessarily count on Sigma himself being one of the tanks that is going to be viable in the future, as that is way too difficult to predict, and perhaps mastering Sigma might not be the way to go. Maybe just getting very good at Sigma and then getting very good at other tanks as well, to be flexible as opposed to being a god at just one. Now the next character that we got to talk about is Widowmaker. Of course, Widowmaker has a very high skill ceiling because, while she doesn't necessarily have like positioning or game sense skills, it's all mechanics, right? You click heads, you got to learn how to hit heads on people that are moving very quickly, and Widow has basically been viable in ranked for as long as ranked has been a thing. Still viable, pretty much always has been viable. Even in the GOATS meta, people were playing Widow in freaking Grandmaster. And Widow is definitely a character that is worth learning historically, and of course your aim is something that is working on. You're really stretching that aim out, and Widowmaker players typically are going to be able to transfer to any type of hit scan and do decently well. Now, that being said, one big problem with Widowmaker one-tricks is sometimes they don't develop themselves in other characters. They don't develop the game sense, the positioning that they need to really set themselves up for the future. So maybe it's best best for you to not completely one-trick Widow. I know that maybe in every single situation, Widow is your best pick, and you want to just play Widow, but maybe in some situations, maybe on Koth maps where Widow's not great, or when you seem to just be getting perma-dived on by a ball, you might want to just swap off and play a comparable hit scan that can help you develop other aspects of your game. Play a character like McCree that shares a similar aim style, a flicking-based aim style as Widowmaker, even if the zoom is not the same, or something like Ashe, having an Ashe Widow in the back of your pocket so that you can be flexible for any given meta, and you're pretty much going to be just fine. Hit scans are super overpowered right now, and like I said, Widow has always been very powerful in ranked. Now, speaking of which, let's talk about the next character. The skill ceiling character on this is probably the highest, if not one of the highest in the entire game, and it's Ana, and she has an extremely high skill ceiling. Very difficult to master perfectly. You need to learn projectile aim. You need to learn hit scan aim, different types of projectile aims in a sleep dart and a nade. You gotta position yourself well, and you live and die by your ability use, and sometimes you gotta hit that sleep dart in order to live. Basically, Ana challenges you on every single axis in the game of Overwatch, in my personal opinion. You have to have high game sense, high positioning, high mechanical skill in order to be an amazing Ana, and I actually do think people who are top tier Anas, like the best of the best Anas in the world, are some of the most flexible characters in all of Overwatch. This is why I do think that even though Ana hasn't historically always been amazing, she's always been good enough to play in ranked all the way up to Grandmaster, and if you are someone who gets very good at Ana, you are someone that is capable of being good at a lot of different characters. Even if you go over to something like a DPS, Ana players have historically been good at Ashe, good at Widow, could play McCree, and can really learn anything because, like I said, Ana challenges you on every single axis, so Ana players typically are very good at learning new characters, and I do think that Ana is worth learning as a result. Now, the next character we gotta talk about is Genji. Very hard character to master, one of the hardest characters to master potentially, but is he worth learning? As someone who has probably put 1,500 hours into Genji personally, I'm gonna tell you, hell no. No, all joking aside, Genji's a really fun character to play. He's insanely fun, and when he was good and when he's good in the meta, he's amazing to be good with. The problem with Genji is there's been way too many metas where Genji just hasn't been good. And another problem with Genji is his skill set, his specific skill set. And I'm not talking about his base level, just learning the default play, the cycles of Genji, the duality of Genji. This is all basic level stuff, but I'm talking about mastery. I'm talking about the ability to get consistent shurikens from close range, one-tap enemies, have insanely quick Dragon Blades, things like that. Very little of that actually transfers to other characters. I actually think it's worthwhile to know Genji enough to play him when the composition that the enemy team is running is something that you can directly counter with Genji, or you're diving with the Genji. I think all that is fine, and you don't have to put a lot of effort into learning how to play Genji with the dive or learning how to nanoblade with the Genji. That's very simple stuff. But to master Genji, I really don't think that it's worth your time in its current state. The way that the game has been balanced for a long time, Genji has not been the best character in the game. And even if you can climb all the way to Grandmaster with Genji, it is going to be difficult in some metas to do so, even if you're really good at Genji, and you'd be able to do it far easier with a number of different characters. And like I said, the biggest problem is that Genji's skill set does not transfer very well to other DPS heroes, unfortunately. So for all these reasons, I really don't think that Genji is worth your time to learn, but maybe that will change in the future. But for now, that's my answer. The next character that we got to talk about is none other than Lucio. Definitely an extremely high skill ceiling. Becoming a Lucio master, especially in ranked where you're not only a DPS Lucio, you got perfect wall riding, you got great boops, you could displace enemies into your team, you can duel enemy DPS. The list goes on and on. Lucio is 100% a character worth learning. If you see any meta, even a meta that is bad for Lucio, you see these Lucio one tricks on ladder climbing all the way to like 4.7k or whatever the case may be. Lucio is freaking phenomenal. He has a ton of solo impact in games. He's a character that has historically been meta a large percentage of the time, and he's a character that really teaches you a lot mechanically, a lot about the positions of everyone on the field, not necessarily you, but you notice when there's weaknesses in the enemy's position and weaknesses in your own, and you can use your abilities to overcome that. And of course, game sense in involving ult tracking, game sense involving calling. Lucio's a phenomenal character to get good at. Doesn't matter what the meta is at the current moment. I think that Lucio is a character that could easily climb to Grandmaster if you mastered Lucio, and he's a character that makes you very good at Overwatch if you do master Lucio. But make sure that you don't neglect some aspect of Lucio in the game sense positioning or mechanic category. There's always more you can do potentially on Lucio. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is in the tanking category, and it's Zarya. Zarya is a decently hard character to master. Now, to get good with Zarya, I don't think it's very hard, but to master Zarya, and I'm talking about the peak of the peak, that can be pretty difficult because you need to learn perfect cooldown management. You start having to respond to things happening on the battlefield very quickly. When someone gets hooked, when someone gets naded, when a CC happens on a target, being able to really quickly flick and bubble is really important. Of course, the tracking is there, that is important, and then just the game sense required to get effective ultimates, push up, and the positioning involved in not dying. All these things matter a lot, and I do think Zarya is 100% a character worth learning. Not only has Zarya been a character that no matter what the meta is, in ranked play, you can easily climb to Grandmaster if you're proficient with Zarya. She's a character that has a ton of solo impact and doesn't really matter what your tank composition is. At the very least, you could get to Grandmaster with Zarya if you were good with her. And you develop a lot of things, most notably tracking. Zarya players historically have been able to transfer to even hit scan characters where people would play Zarya and then Tracer, be able to go back and forth, or Zarya and Soldier. Zarya definitely flexes you mechanically, and of course you're playing a off-tanking role, so you learn a lot about positioning and game sense as well. So she's another character that she has the capability to climb to Grandmaster, and she does develop you as a player. So all in all, she's definitely worth your time picking up and mastering. Now we go to the next character that we got to talk about in this video. It's Doomfist. Now, Doomfist, I don't think he's very difficult to learn at a base level. You know, the cycles of Doomfist are pretty easy to do. That doesn't take a lot of skill, but there is undoubtedly a very high skill ceiling on Doomfist when you're talking about maybe some rollouts, because not all of them are very good in ranked, or you're talking about bounces, and there's a lot of text on Doomfist, intricate matchups. Doomfist can be a very difficult character to be the best, like the best of the best at. That being said, is Doomfist a character worth your time? Well, no, he's fucking not worth your time, and I'm gonna exactly tell you why. The problem with Doomfist is he's been good in some metas, even dominant, and then he'll fall off the face of the earth and be freaking trash. Like right now, he's very, very bad. He has bad matchups across the board. And remember that skill ceiling stuff that I talked about for you. Not the basic stuff like the cycles of Doomfist. I'm talking about the really intricate stuff that make you a master at Doomfist. Most of that does not transfer to other characters. Not very well. A Doomfist that is insane at Doomfist might not be able to take that same amount of impact into other characters. Actually, probably wouldn't. And the thing is, when Doomfist has been extremely good, a lot of the actual solid play that you need to play Doomfist well is not a skill ceiling type ability. It's the cycles of Doomfist. Very consistent. Go in with your cycles, go in with your punch, go in with your seismic slam, use the rest of your abilities to get out, and not crazy techs and not crazy rollouts or all the stuff that you need to master on Doomfist. So I do think that Doomfist is actually a character that is better suited to pick up when the meta is optimal for him and learn him, not main and just hope that the meta is amazing for him. And historically, unfortunately, that has been true. I'm sorry for a lot of you Doomfist mains. While Doomfist is definitely a character that can climb you to some of the higher ranks, you might even struggle a little bit, honestly, in this meta. And Doomfist is really just not a character that I would suggest learning to master at this point in time. Now moving on to the next character that we got to talk about, it's Zenyatta. Now, can a good Zen climb all the way to Grandmaster? 100%. But the problem with Zenyatta is he is a character that actually really requires a lot of the structure or frame of peel and high rank play to play him even remotely correctly. You see, the way that you would actually climb with Zen in the lower ranks is just be mechanically better than everyone and just frag out until you climb. But if you could do that on Zen, you could do that on pretty much any character. I mean, you're just going to be so nuts. You just have to be so much better, basically to the level of smurfing to climb on Zen up to the higher ranks, especially when Zen is not in meta. So essentially, in order to climb to like Masters with Zen, you kind of have to play him incorrectly, different than you would play him in like a top 500 lobby or in scrims. The Zen you would play in that environment is way, way different. Now, Zen is definitely a character that really challenges you positionally, game sense wise, and mechanically, but I do think the problem with Zen is he's not always meta, for one. He can be very frustrating to play in ranked, And most of all, he does have a hard time transitioning, or the skills that you learn on Zen do have a hard time transitioning to some other supports. He's a projectile aimer, which is kind of pretty unique to Zen. Yes, Lucio has something similar, but the way that Lucio plays is very, very different. And a lot of times people that play the Zen will sometimes play the Mercy or the Ana in any scrim environment. I'm not entirely sure if Zen is a character worth learning. It's really hard to say because historically he has been good, but there have also been times where he has been very, very bad. So it's pretty difficult to answer this question. I do think that he's a fine character to learn. Don't know if I would make him my one trick though. Now, the last character in question that is difficult to master, and it's Echo. Now, there's certain parts of Echo that is actually pretty easy. Certain cycles very similar to something like a Doomfist or a Genji, the duality of it all. But Echo can be a character that has a pretty high ceiling when you talk about the tracking that is needed from the beam, and of course, the different variables that can come into play when you're copying enemies' ultimates and learning a lot about how each ultimate works, knowing generally how every single ultimate works, and deciding which one's the best in any given situation. Of course, that is going to require a lot of game sense and a decent amount of mechanical skill. Now, Echo, we don't have a lot of data for her because, of course, she's the most recent character, so we don't really know how good she's going to be over the long term historically. But I do think Echo overall is a character worth learning. Not only does she have the potential to be an amazing flex pick in a lot of different metas because of her ability to fly, of course, which makes her really good against certain types of compositions. She's a character that has enough mobility and nuance to her that she can always play passively with her team and still get value based on breaking shields and, of course, getting value out of her ultimate. I do think that Echo might not always be the best character to climb with, but I do know that she's always a character that you can climb to Grandmaster with at the very least. And I do think there's going to be a bright future ahead of her, not only for the remaining of Overwatch 1, but Overwatch 2 as well. So all in all, I do think that she's worth your time mastering. But if you want to master any of the characters we talked about in this video, you got to go check out the GameLeap website in the links down below right now, where we have in-depth VOD reviews, advanced tips and tricks, big mistakes, and so much more over every single character that is in the entire game. So go check it out right now in the links down below. But thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video. That's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills. I love your faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.